So, hello everyone. Can everyone hear me correctly? So I do believe I'm the first French person to have been invited to this conference so far.
Thank you. Well, very good.
So as you will notice by my accent, English is not my first language, so please do be kind.
It's not mine either, but don't worry.
Otherwise, I will continue this conference in French. Just a little bit about myself. So I'm a qualified dentist from France. I graduated in 2016. I'm the ex-president of VETSA, which is the European Dental Students Association. I'm doing a PhD at King's College on health economics and prevention, and I work for the main dental trade union in France, which is called Les Chirurgiens Dentistes de France, and the French Dental Association, which is a part of. A little bit about the French dental health system. So we have roughly similar countries, as you know. We have 41,000 dentists and a ratio of 61 dentists for 100,000 French persons. 99% of French dentists are under what we call the convention, which is the French dental contracts. And once you're signed in this convention, you cannot move away from the tariffs, which means you cannot have a private practice and a convention one. We don't have any hygienists yet, but they are likely to appear in the few years to come. We have 36,000 liberal dental practitioners, so it's a strong liberal practice. 5,500 employed, and it's a rising figure, and roughly 2,300 orthodontists. You have the demographics over there, so we have some repetition problems. So most dentists want to go in La Côte d'Azur because it's sunny, and in Paris or close to the frontier because you can have patients from other countries coming in. Roughly, we spend 11.3 billion euros on dentistry. You have the share, so the bottom figure is out-of-pocket money, private health insurers in the middle, and public funding on top of it. So if you adjust that to inflation, it's just above the inflation over the years. So no decrease in turnover or income for dentists so far. Complementary health insurers, so private health insurers, are required to take parts of the funding into everyday routine treatments, up to at least 30%, and more on certain procedures. So the main problem that was evoked by the government and also the dental trade unions is that we had regulated fees, which were scaling, fillings, extractions, endodontics, which were completely regulated with no out-of-pocket charges for patients. And those, even though they represented almost 90% of the activity of dental practices, were only 32% of the income. So as prosthetics were not capped, most of the income did come from the dental prosthetics. And so the goal of the negotiations was to balance that, so dentists would get more money for preventive and conservative treatments and a bit less for dental prosthetics. So every 5 years we negotiate the new convention, so it's done with the government, the private health insurers, and the 3 dental trade unions that we have. And usually you sit around the table and you negotiate tariffs based on the activity of dental practices, and you reach an agreement at the end, usually, that goes on and define the fees for all of French dentists, except it was an election period in 2016, and the health minister, Marisol Touraine, decided that if the negotiations did not go through as planned and as she wanted, then she would take a unilateral decision to define the fees from the health ministry. So that did not go well with French people. As you know, we don't like to do as we're told. So she wanted to cap the semi-regulated fees, so no more liberty on dental prosthetics, which did not go well with dentists and dental students. So what did we do? A strike, of course. So dental students started to block the dental hospitals for a period of 6 months. We took out the guillotines again. Some bans started to emerge from dental students against this arbitrary judgment. You can see 2 of them if you want to find the videos on YouTube. I think that's my, thank you. Some grassroots movements actually started, which was a bit hard to manage for dental trade unions because everyone had an opinion and wanted to express it. So massive, massive, massive protest in France. and of course strikes and everything that goes with it. The dental trade unions chose to quit the table of negotiations, saying we've had it, so just impose what you want, and knowing that a new presidential election was coming and that the former government was very unlikely to be elected, as they were not running again, what they chose was to lobby the new presidential candidates. So Conservative Party was supposed to win, everyone thought of. François Fillon then got investigated for tax fraud and everything. So Emmanuel Macron came, ran, and had a program of a zero out-of-pocket charge program, which was very popular. And what he said was, we'll reform the system so that French patients do not have out-of-pocket charges for dental prosthetics, which were previously free, or at least some of them, on audio things for the ears, audio aids, I don't know how you call them, and glasses. So Emmanuel Macron, as you may have heard, got elected, and the new health minister then wanted to start the negotiations again in order to implement this reform for French dentists. So this was, for the trade unions, a way to reopen the negotiations. I won't go over the negotiation process because it's quite long and it involves a lot of domains, but I'll give you the main results of this new convention, and the negotiations effectively lasted 2 years. One dental trade union, la FSDL, was violently against signing anything because they don't like compromise and they think they can always get better with conflict, so they did not sign for it, but we had 2/3 of a majority, so this new convention came into force and removed the previously unilateral decision from the government. So a few figures. So as I said, we have an 11 billion activity. The investment by the NHS and the private insurers was 1.2 billion euros over the course of 5 years, 800,000 on higher fees for restorative treatments, prevention, and new procedures, which I'll describe. They did put some caps on prosthetics for the zero out-of-pocket money on some of the prosthetics, which was almost €500 million increase in terms of net gain for the profession. So 4 baskets for the zero out-of-pocket money, because we had to define which dental prosthetics would be covered by the zero out-of-pocket money, that I'll describe a bit later on. To give you, so one of the things we're proud of is fluoride varnish. So we got that reimbursed for the first time. So 2 times a year, 25 euros each time. It's only the beginning. So just to give you an example, so if you have how the fee-for-service system works in France, if you have 2 appointments, the first one is a prevention exam with 3 or 4 x-rays, you will get 54 euros. On the second one, if you do a scaling and polishing, you will get 28.92. 4 sealants is 86. Then the fluoride varnish application, so you'll get roughly under 200 euros for those 2 prevention examinations. So 3 new procedures for patients under a situation of handicap. You get an additional 100 euros per appointment when you treat someone with a diagnosed handicap, 20 euros per appointment if your patient is on blood thinners, and for periodontal examinations and root scaling and polishing for diabetic patients, you will get 50 euros for a perio exam, and then 80 euros per sextant, so that's almost 500 euros for a perio treatment reimbursed with a zero out-of-pocket charge for the patient. A few examples of the fees, so you can compare to yours. So we had a substantial increase of roughly 30 to 40% on restorative treatment. So 1 surface filling would be 25 euros now. It will be in 2022 because it's a progressive reform. 2 surface, you'll get 50 euros, and 3 surface, 65.5. If you put a post in the root, you'll get 100 euros. So that's a substantial increase for what we had before. If you do an average of 17 restorations per week, which is, believe it or not, the average in France, you will get 10,400 additional turnover per year. If you do 25, which happens in regions with a lot of patients, then that goes up to 15,000. 110 for a molar endo. So for sealants, as you saw, it's roughly around 25 per sealant that you perform on a patient. So that adds up every time, of course, with other procedures. So a 20% increase there. For inlay onlays, so the base of reimbursement went up to 100 euros. It was previously 40. So that means if a patient comes in and needs an inlay or an onlay, then by law, the private insurers will pay at least 30% of that 100 euros and going up to 200, 300 euros, and the social security will pay 70 euros. Two types: if it's in composite, it's capped, so you can only bill a maximum of 350, and if it's a ceramic or precious metal onlay, you're free to do whatever you want, but you still get that 100 at least from the social security and the private insurers. Extractions, roughly 40 euro per one tooth. If you do two of them, there's a discount for the patient, so you go up to 60 euros. So what was really complicated So those are the fees for the baskets. So in blue, zero out-of-pocket baskets. So those are the prosthetics that will be fully covered by both the national health insurance and the private health insurers. So as an example, if you put a zirconium crown from second premolar to incisor on each tooth, you will get 440 euros per tooth. So if you put any other type of ceramic, monolithics, only one material, you'll get 500 with zero out-of-pocket money from the patient. So that's still, if you're doing top and bottom, premolar to premolar, that's still around 4,000 euros for the dentist. So that is pretty good, I think. Metallic crowns reimbursed up to 290, and if you want to do something more aesthetic that requires stratification in ceramics, then you're free to charge whatever you want, but you only get, by law, 100 euros from the social security. You can get more from the private insurers, of course. Inlay cores, which I think you call post-in cores, it's 175 fully funded, and 60 euros for a temporary crown. That's for bridges, but it's a multiplier based on the number of teeth. We got, for the first time, temporary removable dentures, which are quite useful in some treatments. So 1 to 3 teeth, you'll get 450. If it goes up to 8 teeth, 520. And if you put in your patient a full set of removable dentures, you will get 2,300 euros from the, come to France, from the national health insurance and the complementary health insurance. So what I'm working on at King's, and I'm the head of that, is a new contract reform. So we're trying to move from fee-for-service to a mixed payment system based on health outcomes and the work we do at King's, so ICCMS, and soon to be published in the BDJ CCI, which is a practice-based version of ICCMS. We did a report on new payment systems that we are experiencing or trying to experiment in France at the moment, so it's in negotiations. So I'm going to the NHS next week, actually, for that. So it's a risk-based payment system that we are grafting on top of what we already have. They haven't said anything so far, but we're really excited about this because we can switch to more preventive type of treatment. Because we believe that if you touch a drill or if you don't and you give really good advice and maintain your patients in a good health status, then you should not be paid substantially less than if you perform restorative treatment. So we can discuss this a bit later on. I saw in some of your motions, I didn't translate them in case I needed them, but we put some economic stabilizers, which means 2 of them. If the repetition in baskets move, and if, let's say, a lot of patients choose zero out-of-pocket baskets, then that will not work with the projections, so we'll renegotiate the tariffs based on that. And also, what they were quite proud of is that we managed to create an index on materials and the cost of maintaining a dental practice. And if that goes up, then the fees should go up as well. So we're still trying to define with the NHS how that will work, but very interesting. Major policy change. It used to be a fixed dental contract and convention. It would not move for 5 years. Now we've allowed some new working groups, so it's an evolving policy process that may allow new procedures to come in or further adaptation for France. It was a very difficult reform. We still have a large number of French dentists against it, but then again, they're often against everything. I think it's a more balanced payment system towards restorative treatments and prevention, adaptable policymaking, as I've said. What it's lacking is we have no health outcomes data so far, so we don't know how efficient it is. We don't know what's the health status of our population, so that's a big challenge for the years to come, I think. The economics are supposed to be measured, and then there will be some new data coming in, so hopefully we'll publish those and we'll send them to you. I think we're on the path of achieving universal dental health coverage for our population because we have most of the treatments now without any fees for patients, so as a health professional, I think we can be proud of that. And of course, the positive thing about the new payment system. We published the first version of this reform in health policy, if you want to have a look at it, and there'll be a second one coming, hopefully, next year. So thank you for your attentions, and I'll take any questions from them. Sure.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you very much, Marco. We have 2 roving mics. If you wish to speak, put your arms in the air. Leah will look out for you, and then we'll get mics to you. As I've asked, please, can we ask questions and we don't want essays. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ian Mills, Devon LDC. Thank you very much, Marco. Very interesting presentation. I'd be interested to hear your views on the UDA system and whether you feel that would be something that France would consider implementing.
How long do I have? Based on, I guess, feedback from your associations and your motions, I don't think it's a system that looks to work with dental practitioners, and there's no adhesion to this system after a number of years. So, no, I don't think it would work in France, to be frankly honest. So.
Thank you. Stephen.
Thanks very much for a most interesting discussion and talk. In France, do dentists work singly without a nurse or with a nurse?
We have a very low employment rate in dental practices compared to the UK. So I think we still have a portion, I think 30% of dentists that work alone in dental practices. So we're trying to improve that, obviously, for a number of reasons. But yes, compared to the UK, France hasn't diversified its workforce as much as the UK has over the years.
Thank you very much. Okay, Eddie Crouch, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I've heard it at the BDA a few weeks ago, and I still probably haven't recovered from the figures. They still look as exciting seeing them on the screen again. Last year, I proposed a motion at one of these conferences, the conference that we held in Belfast, that the profession should consider some form of industrial action. The BDA carried out a survey of its members following that, and about 11% were prepared to take half a day off, maybe for some CPD. How do we get the profession in this country to be more French?
Très bien. Très bien. Richard.
So those 11% was before this presentation, right? France has a culture of protesting, and I think it's how the political system evolves. Obviously, in the UK, it's not such a popular option. We follow our members because we know that if a reform is likely to generate some tension, they will go ballistic on the government and they will strike naturally. So we don't have to motivate them as a trade union to do it. They will spontaneously do so. So I think it's a problem for the British Dental Association and some of you representatives. But if no one is complaining about the system, then they complain. Yeah. I think the way we look at it is, will this reform affect my patient's health and the quality of healthcare? Often there are some corporatist reactions from those professionals, but if it affects the quality of care, then I think you have some legitimacy to actually protest. If you feel that your treatments the quality of your treatments cannot be guaranteed anymore, I think you have some legitimate actions to protest or to make formal complaints. So I don't know how you do it in the UK, but there's maybe some ground.
Thank you. Richard.
Thank you, Marco. It's very interesting. My point really is, from what I gather, patient charges are low or don't exist in France. Is that correct?
So previously, for examinations, extractions, fillings, endodontics, scalings, so most routine treatments, you would not get an out-of-pocket charge if you had a private health insurance. But by law, most of the French population do. So I think we have a coverage of 95%. So most French patients do not face out-of-pocket money on those treatments. The things they were complaining about was dental prosthetics, where the out-of-pocket charges were quite strong, with on average 190 euros per porcelain-infused metal crown per patient. So that's what Macron tried to reduce in his program. It's obviously a vote winner for some political candidates to promise things like this. So,
following on that, with the private insurance, presumably they pay through taxation or their employment. So has that gone up significantly? I mean, how's it affordable?
And so Emmanuel Macron and his health ministers promised that with this reform, insurance premiums would not go up, and it has been a very strong fight between the private insurers and the government to try to maintain those fees pretty much equivalent. It hasn't come into force yet, so we can't check what is going to happen. Apparently, it seems quite equilibrated this year, so they're not anticipating the charge. I think the total projected budget for this zero out-of-pocket reform is £300 million, which is significant, but not that major compared to the 30 billion something market for those private insurers in France.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Sorry.
Hi there, Marco. Thanks very much for a very informative talk there. The question I'd like to ask you, would it be possible for you to give that presentation to our colleagues at the Department of Health so that they can realise what great value for money they get in the UK?
Thank you very much.
Yes, but as you may know, you guys may be leaving the European Union anytime soon, so I'd like to apply for a visa first, and then you're welcome to send it to the Department of Health. Thank you very much.
Richard, please.
Your presentation has left us really breathless and green with envy. We can only sit here and admire the figures that you've achieved. But it does raise one or two very interesting points. I think you mentioned, I may have got this wrong, that there appears to be very little in the way of monitoring of the work done beforehand, the work done afterwards, which raises, of course, the very, very important issue, and I think everybody in this room would support this. Is there any form of policing? There seems to be an unrestrained item of service treatment where anybody can do anything to anybody, and there appears to be very little in the way of comeback. Is there any form of policing? Is there any form of monitoring?
Yes, there is. So it depends on the region and how culturally that has developed in your local area, but as we have a functioning coding system that notes all the procedures that have been performed, which I think you had a little while ago. If you go significantly above the average in terms of treatments that you do, you will get a visit from one of the dental advisors from the government. They will check it with you, and if something is a bit fishy or doesn't seem right, then they will undertake a thorough investigation of your treatments for the past 3 to 5 years, depending on how serious the case is. And if your treatments were not good enough, or if the indication was not respected, you'll have to refund the money that was given to you to the NHS. So it's a lot of work for the trade union to represent those dentists in those investigations. In some areas, departments in France, you will have 3 or 4 activity controls a week. In some, they barely exist, so it really depends on the region, but they do exist. Turnovers are on average 270,000 euros per year, but you have some dentists, general practitioners, that go up to 600, 700,000 euros with exactly the same convention. So these do get some controls quite often.
Thank you, Marco. Bruce Porteous, please.
Yes, at the beginning you mentioned you got no hygienists or very few hygienists or therapists.
We have no hygienists,
No hygienists or
nor therapists.
How could you sort of put forward any sort of preventative type practice, a practice that we are trying to look at a prevention-based capitation system instead? Is this partially to do with the employment law, the taxation and insurance that in France some people almost get a job for life and it's difficult to give them the P45?
No, it has, so French dental trade unions up until very recently did not want hygienists because they thought that with the demographics that we have, we could carry on most of the treatments that were to be performed in France. That's for very obviously political reasons. This has changed significantly last year. So LCDF, which I work for, has taken a position not to create hygienists, but to create an additional level of qualification for the already existing dental nurses in order to give them some of the competencies, or it depends on which country, but some of the competencies of dental hygienists. Employment, yes, has tougher rules in France, but that's across all sectors. But it might be a small part of explaining it, but probably not the most of it.
Thank you. Right, Keith Percival, please.
Thank you for your presentation. Very, very interesting. Do you have anything like a national performance list? And do you have regulatory bodies like CQC and GDC?
So we have the Order of Dentists, which acts as the regulator. So it is chaired by a dentist, and the committees are all chaired by dentists. So it's supposed to act as the state representative. But yeah, so they will regulate, and if there is a complaint from a patient or from one of your colleagues, it's that body that you will go to in order to try to solve, I think, mitigate the initial complaint, and then it can go to other jurisdictions if the problem is not solved between this order and the dentists.
Thank you.
Regarding guidelines, we have to follow the equivalent of NICE guidelines that are considered to be the reference, or if you're doing something else, you'd have to justify it with a scientific society. I did not bring with me the procedure rate in France. I think that would have been quite interesting to compare yours and ours, because I believe, from what I can see, that in the UK, people are much more prone to sue than we are in France. I think it's mostly cultural, but I don't have any figures on that on me, but I could find them quite easily.
Thank you. Right, we have a question and 2 more questions. Gentleman there, and then Mark Reed.
Within the UK, patients don't tend to know much about the dentist's plight, and they tend to have quite a strong opinion about how much doctors and dentists should be paid. I wondered what the public feel about your system in France, where it sounds like the salaries might be quite impressive.
So on average, a dentist makes 90,000 euros a year. On average, it varies a lot, depending on if you do implants, if you do ortho, if you do things like that. French patients have a very strong view on how much we should be paid, which is as less as possible. So roughly the same public image and difficulties to communicate for that. So it's always a strange game for dental trade unions to advocate for what is and appears to be a good reform without sounding to corporatists, so probably the same kind of public image as you do.
Right, final question, Mark Green, please.
It's a very brief question. Do you have a recruiting problem in France?
We actually do. So I'm opening my dental clinic and I'll be there with some cards. We do have a dental trade unions wouldn't say we have a recruiting problem, but there are a lot of vacancies in France pretty much anywhere outside of major cities and the coastline in the south. You could get a decent, well-equipped practice almost for free in France at the moment, so just paying for the building itself, but we don't sell patient tails anymore, so you will join a practice without any fee. So it's a very attractive market, I think, for dentists, and we have around 600 dentists that join from EU countries every year. So you still have until the 31st of October to achieve that. Thank you very much.
Marco, thank you very much.